Hey, good morning. It's Pastor Jeff from here at Freedom Church with your Sunday morning message. Thank you so much for tuning in with us here. So let me ask you, how is your resume? It's kind of a strange way to kick off a sermon this time of year, isn't it? A copy of my resume is saved on my computer at work. It lists a lot of important things that go into attempting to get hired. Things like my work experience, my references, my schooling, my education, my background. But the funny thing is, I have my resume set to go, yet I have not ever officially applied or interviewed for a job. Every job I have was offered to me, and I just showed up and had a conversation and got it. And so I've never used my resume the way that it's meant to be used. It is in my file at the Betty Griffin Center, is in my file here at the church, and it is in my file at the school district for coaching. But I've never actually used it to get into a door. But if you think about your resume, it has things in it. My resume has 6 references in it. I choose the 6 people who are not related to me that will speak most highly of me. The ones who will have the most respect from the institution that I may be seeking employment with. Luckily, I've never been fired. I've not been laid off or lost a job. I've always moved on when it was time to move on, knock on wood. If you have been fired from a job, you don't list that employer as a reference. If you've had a problem with a past boss, you don't list them as a reference. If you've worked in a place with a bad reputation or that may be frowned upon, you probably don't list that one either. And you certainly don't list any of the negatives. You only list the positives. Why? Because you are selling yourself. It's part of your sales pitch to get in the door. Well, in Matthew's time, the time that we're looking at for Jesus' birth, your resume was quite different. Your resume was your lineage, your genealogy, whatever word you want to use. That's what you used to open doors. It was who you were, where you were from. And that today, in a small town, can still open doors, but not like it used to. I want to read Matthew chapter 1 for you. It's probably one of the most important parts of the entire Bible that we skim across. If you are reading the Bible cover to cover, I can guarantee you skim this and you go, oh my gosh, this is so boring. Why is this here? What is this doing here? I'm going to tell you today. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nashon, Nashon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. We put some bonuses in there. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. More bonus information for you there. Solomon the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram, Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Amon, Amon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abihud, Abihud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azar, Azar the father of Zadok, Zadok the father of Achim, Achim the father of Elihud, Elihud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Matthan, Matthan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who we called the Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David. 14 generations from David to the exile of Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Now, that may be the absolute most boring piece of literature in the entire Bible. I mean, Deuteronomy isn't great, Judges is kind of dry, and a lot of the prophets are anything but entertaining masterpieces. But this is how Matthew chose to kick off the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And in literary form, the very beginning of the gospel, the way we read the Bible, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is possibly the most telling and informational piece of good news you will ever read in your life, and you've missed it every time. First, the Bible is God's word, therefore it is inspired by God, penned by man, 100% breathed by God. If Jesus wanted his resume to be missing some things, then Matthew would have left those off. People like Tamar, who actually tricked her father-in-law into sleeping with her. Hello. They list Tamar as a mother. Rahab, who was a Canaanite and a prostitute. Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. King David, who was one of the greatest leaders of all time, yes, he also fell as hard as possible at times. And it lists David as the father of Solomon, whose mother had been, what? Uriah's wife. It doesn't leave anything to the imagination. It is all inclusive and no detail was left out. That is the first good news. That Jesus included everyone, the good and what appears to be the bad, in his resume, which Matthew shared in chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. I mean, there is a quote going around on Facebook with a picture of Cousin Eddie, right? You know, the crazy, annoying uncle who shows up with his RV in the middle of Lampoon's Christmas movie. He shows up on all their trips. Cousin Eddie has Rottweilers for dogs. And he has lost his job. And he drains his septic tank out of his beat-up RV into the street drains. The Facebook picture says, if you haven't figured out who the Cousin Eddie in your family is, it's most likely you. Cousin Eddie wouldn't make a Jewish first century resume, so to speak. Certainly a king who slept with his wife of one of the most devoted mighty men, a prostitute, and a woman who tricked her father-in-law into sleeping with her. Those get edited out every time in today's world. If I'm writing my resume, those people are left out. Also, this was a highly patriarchal society and time. Women would never be included in that type of list. But not only were there women listed, there were Moabites, Canaanites, and Gentiles listed, which would be inferior races in that time. So more good news. Those who are morally, racially, or Old Testament law condemned or considered unworthy are suddenly worthy when Jesus makes his grand entrance. The genealogy also covers a long, long space of time, proving that while God's promises may take time, they always get kept. God's works, and more importantly, his grace, do not operate on our schedules or under our time frames. I am eternally thankful that God plays the long game with our lives, and a daily circumstance cannot derail his ultimate plans for me or for you. That's the first sign that this is a worthy of thanksgiving message, that God is in it for the long haul. And in Genesis chapter 3, we are told that one will come that will crush Satan's head. Abraham was promised by God that his descendants would bless generations beyond his comprehension. His numbers would outnumber the stars. And the final good news I want to share with you today is that Jesus brings perfect rest. There were 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to exile, 14 from the exile to Babylon to the Messiah. You see, Matthew started with the genealogy because he realized the gospel isn't just about Jesus showing up. It's about all that unraveled in God's plans before Jesus made his entrance into the world as human. When you find out that you're expecting nowadays, you do a lot of things. You let your family and loved ones know. You let others know. You get the sonogram. You do all the things that you have to do. And then nowadays they make announcements and post pictures on social media. Jesus' birth announcement had been mentioned from the beginning of time, from Genesis 3. It wasn't a birth, it was an entry from one dimension to another. There were 6 sevens in this genealogy, making Jesus the very beginning of the 7th 7. Now, in Jewish custom, every 7 days was a day of rest. If you recall the story of creation, God rested on the 7th day. But in the Mosaic law, the number 7 goes far deeper than just a Sabbath day. In their law, farmers were to let their fields lay fallow every 7 years to let it replenish its nutrients. So not only did day 7 represent rest, year 7 represented a greater rest. Wait, it goes farther. As we investigate Leviticus chapter 25, the last year of the 7th period of sevens, which would be the 49th year, was to be a jubilee. All slaves were to be freed, all debts were to be forgiven, and all land and people would have a full rest from any work and any debts. Sign me up for this one. No bills for this year, an entire year, 2025. Let's pretend that's the 7th of the sevens. No bills, no work, only rest. That's a Sabbath. Jesus broke into time from heaven to earth, not to give some good advice, not to bring good news, to be good news. And Jesus broke into time and he carried his entire resume with him. And he did it so that prostitutes and kings could sit at the same table and partake of God's grace. But he also did it so that mentally and spiritually we can all find rest in being free. And what I am most thankful for this Thanksgiving season is the fact that the God is a God of details. And every detail matters to him, every single one, so there are no mistakes. I am thankful that God is in the long game. Unlike us, we quit when it gets tough. We change when things look rough. God keeps on keeping on. I want you to think about this. In spite of man's sin and scandal, Jesus showed up. In spite of racism and sexism, Jesus showed up. Though the people had completely forgotten God, Jesus showed up. And in spite of complete pandemonium, Jesus showed up. The surprise pregnancy, the sudden census, the long road from Nazareth to Bethlehem, the unpleasant and difficult resulted in the most important birth and miracle in the history of the earth. Luke 2:7 says, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. Everything before this happened so that that moment could happen. No doubt the first Christmas was far different than Mary had planned or even imagined. God used decades of struggles to bring about a miracle. Don't we all need that reminder today? In your world of short nights and long days at work, lots of stress, don't you need to be reminded that it's Jesus that holds it all together, not us? Colossians 1:15-17 says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. John 1:14 says, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. See, God didn't become a powerful wind or a devouring fire. He became a single cell, a fertilized egg, an embryo, a baby, humanity in its truest and purest form. Jesus entered our world not as a human, not like a human, but fully human. And God included every single one of us in his plans. No matter what you have done, you are a part of the plan. And for that, we should be eternally thankful. Have a great day and God bless.